My uncle got a credit card in my dead mother's name. I stared at the credit card statement in my hands, reading my mother's name over and over again. Patricia Helen Morrison. My mom had been dead for 3 months. The envelope had arrived at my apartment by mistake. The mail carrier mixed up units 4B and 4D again. I almost walked it over to Mrs. Chen next door without opening it, but something made me pause. Mom's maiden name was Morrison, and she'd been Patricia Helen before she married Dad. The address was wrong, but everything else. My hands shook as I tore open the envelope. Capital One Platinum Card. Statement period, March 1st to 31st, 2024. Account holder, Patricia H. Morrison. Current balance, $4,847.82. I collapsed onto my couch, scanning the charges. Best Buy, $1,299.99. Shell gas station, $67.43. Amazon, $234.56. Outback Steakhouse, $89.73. The dates were all recent. March 8th, March 15th, March 22nd. Mom died on December 18th, 2023. Someone was using her identity. Someone was spending money in my dead mother's name. I grabbed my phone and called the customer service number, my heart hammering against my ribs. Capital One, this is Jennifer, how can I help you today? Hi, I received a statement for an account that shouldn't exist. The cardholder is deceased. I'm sorry to hear about your loss. Can you provide me with the account number? I rattled off the 16 digits, then waited through several minutes of hold music that felt like hours. Sir. I see this account was opened on February 14th, 2024. The application was submitted online with full verification. I'm showing the authorized user as Michael T. Morrison. Would that be you? The phone nearly slipped from my hand. Michael Morrison. Yes, sir, is that you? No, I whispered. That's my uncle. Uncle Mike. Mom's younger brother. The one who'd held my hand at her funeral and promised to help me navigate all the legal stuff. The one who'd insisted on handling her paperwork because I was too overwhelmed to deal with it right now. The responsible one. The one everyone in our family looked up to. Sir. Are you still there? Yes, I'm here. I need to report fraud. That man opened this account using my deceased mother's information. Jennifer's tone shifted to business mode. I'll need to transfer you to our fraud department. Can you hold for just a moment? While I waited, I thought about the past few months. Uncle Mike coming over every weekend to sort through Mom's things. Him insisting I didn't need to be there, that it was too painful, that he'd handle everything. The way he'd gotten defensive when I asked to see the estate paperwork last week. This is David from Fraud Prevention. I understand you're reporting identity theft. Yes. Someone opened a credit card using my mother's name. She died 3 months ago. I'm very sorry for your loss. We'll need to start a formal investigation. Can you email us a copy of the death certificate? I took notes as David explained the process, but my mind kept drifting. $4,000. Uncle Mike had spent $4,000 pretending to be my dead mother. Money that should have been part of her estate. Money that should have gone to me, her only child. By the time I hung up, the grief had crystallized into something sharper. This wasn't just theft. This was desecration. He'd taken her name, her memory, and twisted it into his personal ATM machine. I grabbed my laptop and started typing. It was time to find out exactly how deep this betrayal went. I spent the next 4 hours going through every piece of financial information I could find. Mom's bank statements, insurance documents, even old emails. What I discovered made my stomach turn. The credit card was just the beginning. I found a second statement buried in my email spam folder. Apparently Uncle Mike had been using Mom's old Gmail account too. Chase Freedom Card, opened January 30th, balance, $3,241.67. The charges were smaller but more frequent. Gas stations, grocery stores, restaurants. He'd been living off these cards for months. But the real punch to the gut came when I called Mom's bank directly. First National, this is Carlos speaking. Hi, I need to check on my mother's account. She passed away in December and I'm the executor of her estate. The lie came easily. Uncle Mike had never actually filed the paperwork to make himself executor, despite his promises. I'll need to verify your identity. Can you provide the account number and answer some security questions? I rattled off Mom's information from memory. Her birthday, her social security number, the name of her first pet. 15 minutes later, Carlos delivered the news that made my knees buckle. The account shows regular withdrawals through February 28th. The final balance before closure was $347.82. Closure. Who closed it? Let me check. The account was closed by Michael Morrison on March 1st. He provided proper documentation showing power of attorney. Power of attorney. Uncle Mike had convinced Mom to sign power of attorney papers when she was in hospice, saying it would make things easier for everyone. I remembered him bringing the documents to the hospital, remembered how tired she'd been, how she'd signed them without really reading. He'd drained her entire bank account. $14,000. Gone. I hung up and immediately called Mom's life insurance company. 20 minutes of hold music later, I learned that Uncle Mike had filed a claim in January and received the $25,000 payout in February. As the estate executor. My inheritance. The money Mom had scraped together working double shifts as a nurse for 20 years. The money she told me would help me finish college and get a good start in life. All of it, gone. I sat in my kitchen as the sun set, surrounded by printed emails and bank statements, calculating the theft. The credit cards, the bank account, the life insurance. Uncle Mike had stolen nearly $47,000 from his dead sister's memory. My phone buzzed. A text from Uncle Mike himself, asterisk, hey kiddo, want to grab dinner this weekend? I know these months have been hard. Family sticks together, asterisk. The audacity was breathtaking. He was texting me from the phone he probably bought with Mom's Chase card, inviting me to dinner he'd pay for with Mom's Capital One account. I screenshot the text and added it to my growing folder of evidence. Then I opened a new browser window and searched for the phone number of the local police department's fraud division. But first, I had one more call to make. I scrolled through my contacts until I found my cousin Sarah, Uncle Mike's daughter. Sweet, trusting Sarah who'd posted on Facebook just last week about how proud she was of her dad for taking such good care of Patricia's affairs during this difficult time. It was time the family learned who Uncle Mike really was. And I was going to make sure everyone knew exactly what their beloved, responsible, family member had been doing with their dead sister's identity. The phone rang twice before Sarah picked up. Hey cuz. How are you holding up? Sarah, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. We need to talk. Sarah, we need to talk about your dad. There was a pause. What do you mean? Is everything okay? I took a deep breath. Your father has been stealing from my mom's estate. He opened credit cards in her name after she died and took everything, her bank account, her life insurance, everything. What? That's impossible. Dad would never. I have the statements right here, Sarah. 2 credit cards, $8,000 in charges. He drained her bank account completely and cashed out her life insurance policy. We're talking about nearly $50,000. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Sarah. I'm here. Her voice was smaller now. Are you sure? Maybe there's some mistake. There's no mistake. I have documentation for everything. The credit card companies confirmed he's listed as an authorized user. The bank confirmed he closed her account in March. The insurance company confirmed he filed the claim. Another long pause. Then, oh my god. Oh my god, that explains. Jesus, I'm so sorry. Explains what? Dad's been different lately. New clothes, expensive dinners, he bought Mom that diamond necklace for their anniversary last month. We thought maybe he got a raise or... I don't know, we didn't ask questions. My stomach twisted. Uncle Mike had bought Aunt Linda jewelry with my mother's stolen money. Money Mom had saved working 12-hour shifts at the hospital, coming home exhausted and smelling like antiseptic. Sarah, I need to know, has he said anything about Mom's estate? About being the executor? He said there wasn't much left after the medical bills and funeral costs. Maybe a few $100s. He said you knew and that you were okay with him handling the final paperwork. The lie was so casual, so complete. Uncle Mike had looked his own daughter in the eye and lied about robbing his dead sister's grave. There were no medical bills, I said quietly. Mom had good insurance through the hospital. And I never agreed to anything, he never even filed executor paperwork. He just took everything. I heard Sarah crying on the other end. I can't believe this. I can't believe my own father would. How could he do this to you? To Aunt Patricia's memory? I don't know. But Sarah, I'm going to the police tomorrow. And I'm going to make sure everyone in the family knows what he did. Good. Her voice was fierce now. Good. Do you need me to do anything? Do you need help? Actually, yes. Do you know if your dad has been spending more money lately? Big purchases, trips, anything unusual? God, yes. He booked that cruise for next month, said it was an early retirement celebration. And he's been talking about buying a new truck. We thought he was finally treating himself after years of being so responsible with money. Responsible. There was that word again. Uncle Mike, the responsible one. The one who volunteered to handle the hard stuff when families were grieving. The one who showed up with casseroles and paperwork and promises to take care of everything. Sarah, I have to ask, do you think there might be other people? Other families he's done this to? The question hung in the air like poison gas. Oh no. Remember Mrs. Patterson? His neighbor who died last year. Dad helped her son with some paperwork. Sarah's voice trailed off. And there was that lady from his church, Mrs. Kowalski. He was so helpful with her estate after she passed. My blood ran cold. This wasn't grief-driven desperation or a one-time lapse in judgment. This was a pattern. Uncle Mike had turned helping grieving families into his personal business model. Sarah, I think your dad might be a serial predator. I need to call those families, Sarah said, her voice shaking. Mrs. Patterson's son David, and Mrs. Kowalski's daughter Anna. Oh God, what if Dad did the same thing to them? Wait, I said, my mind racing. Don't call them yet. If we're right about this, we need to be smart. Your dad can't know we're onto him until I have everything documented for the police. You're right. Jesus, I feel sick. My own father. After we hung up, I sat staring at my laptop screen, trying to process the magnitude of what we'd uncovered. 3 families, possibly more. 3 grieving families who trusted Mike Morrison to help them navigate the worst time of their lives. I opened a new document and started typing everything I could remember about Uncle Mike's helpfulness over the years. Mrs. Patterson had died of cancer last March. I remembered him bringing her son David a casserole at the funeral, offering to help with all that confusing paperwork. Mrs. Kowalski from his church had passed in September, and he'd made the same offer to her daughter. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, found Anna Kowalski's number. Should I wait to call her, yes. Let me talk to the police first. We need to do this right, okay. Dad just got home. Acting completely normal. Making jokes about his day. I don't know how to even look at him, I could imagine the scene, Uncle Mike walking into his kitchen, kissing Aunt Linda hello, probably talking about what a long day he'd had at work. All while stolen money sat in his wallet and my mother's identity lived on in his credit card applications. The next morning, I dressed carefully for my appointment with Detective Rivera at the Suffolk County Police Department. I'd spent half the night organizing my evidence into a neat folder, credit card statements, bank records, insurance documents, screenshots of Uncle Mike's Facebook posts showing off his new purchases. This is quite a collection, Detective Rivera said, flipping through the papers. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Your uncle was thorough, but not careful. Opening cards in February for someone who died in December. That's amateur hour. What I don't understand is how the applications went through. Don't they check death records? You'd be surprised how easy it is to slip through the cracks, especially if someone has inside knowledge of the deceased's personal information. Your uncle had access to everything: social security number, address history, financial records. He probably knew your mother's information better than she did. Rivera leaned back in her chair. Here's what's going to happen. We'll start with the credit card fraud. That's the easiest to prove. The life insurance claim is trickier because he did have power of attorney, but the timing is suspicious. If those powers were only meant to be active while your mother was alive, he committed fraud there too. My cousin thinks there might be other victims. Other families he's done this to. That changes things significantly. If we're looking at a pattern of behavior, this becomes a much bigger investigation. Rivera made a note. I'll need those family members' contact information. We'll approach them carefully. This kind of news is devastating. I handed over Anna Kowalski's and David Patterson's phone numbers, which Sarah had texted me that morning. Now, here's the important part, Rivera continued. Your uncle can't know we're investigating until we're ready to move. Can you act normal around him? No confrontations, no accusations, nothing that might spook him. The thought of sitting across from Uncle Mike at a family dinner, making small talk while knowing what he'd done, made my stomach turn. How long will this take? If it's just your mother's case. Maybe 2 weeks. If we find other victims, could be months. Rivera stood up. One more thing, don't discuss this with anyone except your cousin. The fewer people who know, the better our chances of building a solid case. I left the police station feeling hollow. 2 weeks minimum of pretending Uncle Mike was still the family hero. 2 weeks of watching him spend Mom's money while I scraped together rent payments and grocery funds. My phone rang as I reached my car. Unknown number. Hello. Is this Patricia Morrison's son? This is David Patterson. Sarah Morrison gave me your number. She said you might have some information about my mother's estate. My heart sank. Mr. Patterson, I think we need to meet. David Patterson and I met at a Starbucks halfway between our towns. I recognized him immediately. He had the same hollow-eyed look I'd been carrying for months, the expression of someone still processing impossible loss. His mother had died of pancreas 11 months ago, and he looked like he hadn't slept well since. Sarah was pretty vague on the phone, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. Something about her father and estate issues? I pulled out a folder I'd prepared, copies of Uncle Mike's credit card statements with Mom's name on them, bank records, everything. Mr. Patterson, I think my uncle stole from your mother's estate the same way he stole from mine. David's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. What do you mean, stole? I walked him through everything, the credit cards, the drained bank accounts, the insurance fraud. With each detail, David's face grew paler. After Mom died, Mike was so helpful, he said quietly. He brought food, helped me understand all the paperwork. Said he'd handled estates before and knew all the tricks to avoid probate delays. What happened to your mother's accounts? Mike said there were more medical bills than we'd realized. Hospital billing errors, he called them. Claims that insurance had denied after the fact. David rubbed his forehead. The bank account was basically empty by February. Maybe $800 left after everything was settled. How much should there have been? Mom had about $12,000 in savings. Plus her life insurance, $15,000. Mike said the insurance company was being difficult, dragging their feet on the payout, but he'd keep pushing them. I felt sick. David, did you ever receive that insurance money? Mike said it got tied up in some legal issue. Something about a clerical error with Mom's beneficiary designation. He was working with lawyers to sort it out, but these things take time. David's voice trailed off as the pieces clicked together. Oh my God. He never filed the claim, did he? I think he filed it, but he had himself listed as the executor. Just like he did with my mom's policy. David sat back in the booth like I punched him. $27,000. He stole $27,000 from my mother's memory. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The words felt pathetic, but what else could I say? All those times he checked on me, asking how I was holding up, if I needed anything. David's hands clenched into fists. He was probably calculating how much more he could take. There might be a third victim. Anna Kowalski. Did you know her? Mrs. Kowalski from St. Mary's. She died around September, right? David's eyes widened. Mike spoke at her memorial service. Talked about how important it is for neighbors to help each other through life's hardest moments. The hypocrisy was staggering. Uncle Mike standing at a podium, delivering heartfelt words about community and caring, while planning his next theft. I've been working with the police, I said. Detective Rivera from the fraud division. She'll want to talk to you. Good. Yes. Whatever I need to do. David pulled out his phone. I'm calling the insurance company right now. If Mom's policy was never claimed. While he talked to the insurance customer service line, I texted Detective Rivera, * meeting with David Patterson now. Confirmed victim. $27,000 stolen. Insurance policy never paid out to legitimate beneficiary, *. Her response came quickly, * bring him in tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. This is bigger than we thought, *. David hung up, his face grim. Policy was never claimed. They still have $15,000 sitting in an account waiting for the proper beneficiary paperwork. At least you can recover that part. It's not about the money anymore, David said, his voice hard. It's about what he did to our mothers. What he did to us when we were drowning in grief and needed help. I understood completely. Uncle Mike hadn't just stolen money, he'd weaponized our trust, turned our love for our mothers into his opportunity. He'd seen our tears at those funerals and calculated dollar signs. David, we're going to destroy him, I said. Legally, financially, socially, everything. Good, he replied. When do we start? The next morning, David and I sat in Detective Rivera's office with a third person, Anna Kowalski, a tired-looking woman in her 40s who'd driven down from Boston after David tracked her down the night before. Mrs. Kowalski had some very interesting information to share, Detective Rivera said, pulling out a fresh notepad. Anna, can you tell them what you told me? Anna's voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly as she spoke. After my mother died in September, Mike Morrison approached me at the funeral. Said he'd helped other families in similar situations and knew how overwhelming the paperwork could be. I exchanged glances with David. The exact same approach. He offered to help sort through Mom's finances while I took time to grieve. Said it was the least he could do for a fellow parishioner. Anna's mouth twisted bitterly. I was so grateful. I just lost my job 3 weeks before Mom passed, and I was barely keeping my head above water. What did he take? David asked. Mom's checking account had $4,000 in it. Her savings had $8,000. Mike said after the funeral expenses and outstanding medical bills, there wasn't much left. Maybe $600. Anna wiped her eyes. But here's the thing, I found Mom's insurance policy papers when I was cleaning out her house last month. $25,000 policy through her work. Mike told me it had lapsed years ago due to missed payments. Detective Rivera leaned forward. Did you follow up with the insurance company? I called them yesterday after David contacted me. Not only was the policy active, but a claim was filed in October. Paid out to the estate executor, Michael Morrison, on November 15th. My stomach dropped. He stole $37,000 from you. But that's not the worst part, Anna continued. When I was going through Mom's paperwork, I found a notebook where she kept track of her finances. She was meticulous about it, recorded every deposit, every bill payment, every expense. According to her records, she had over $18,000 in her accounts when she died, not 12 like I thought. Detective Rivera made notes as Anna talked. So Morrison didn't just steal the insurance money, he was skimming from the accounts before he closed them. It gets worse, Anna said. I found 3 credit card applications in Mom's handwriting, but the signatures looked off. Like someone had traced them. They were all denied because Mom's credit was frozen after she died, but the applications were dated 2 weeks after her death. The room went quiet. Uncle Mike had been so successful with my mom's identity theft that he'd gotten bold, sloppy. 3 failed applications meant 3 separate attempts to create new revenue streams from Anna's mother's corpse. Jesus, David whispered. How many families has he done this to? That's what we're going to find out, Detective Rivera said. Anna, I need you to write down everything you remember about your interactions with Morrison. Every conversation, every document he asked you to sign, every explanation he gave you for missing money. As Anna started writing, Rivera turned to me and David. I've been making some calls this morning. Morrison has been volunteering with the grief counseling program at Mercy Hospital for 3 years. He also volunteers with the bereavement ministry at 2 different churches. The scope of it hit me like a truck. Uncle Mike hadn't been randomly targeting families, he'd positioned himself at the epicenter of local death and grief. He'd built a network that gave him access to dozens of vulnerable, grieving families every year. How many victims are we talking about? I asked. Potentially dozens. We're going to need to look at every family he's helped over the past 3 years. Rivera closed her notepad. This is now officially a major fraud investigation. I'm recommending we bring in the FBI, crossing state lines, mail fraud, identity theft on this scale puts it in federal territory. My phone buzzed with a text from Uncle Mike, *Hey kiddo, still on for dinner Sunday? Linda's making her famous pot roast, *. I showed the text to Detective Rivera. She smiled grimly. Perfect. Act normal, accept the invitation. We're going to need you to wear a wire. Sunday dinner at Uncle Mike and Aunt Linda's felt surreal with the FBI recording device taped to my chest. Detective Rivera had introduced me to Agent Sarah Chen that morning, and the tiny microphone felt like it was burning through my shirt. Just act natural, Agent Chen had said. We need him to talk about the estate, about helping other families. Don't push too hard, let him brag. Men like this love to feel important. Now I sat at the familiar dining room table, surrounded by the same floral wallpaper I'd stared at during countless family dinners, listening to Uncle Mike talk about his volunteer work. The Hendersons are doing much better now, he was saying, cutting into Aunt Linda's pot roast. Lost their father in January, massive heart attack. Left behind such a mess of paperwork. Poor Susan was completely overwhelmed. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. The Hendersons. Another family. That's so nice of you to help, I managed. You're always so good with that stuff. Well, someone has to step up. These families don't know the first thing about estate management, probate law, insurance claims. They'd get eaten alive by the bureaucracy. Uncle Mike smiled warmly. I've probably helped 15 or 20 families over the past couple years. It's the Christian thing to do. 15 or 20 families. Agent Chen's voice echoed in my head, let him brag. Wow, that's amazing. Do you ever get overwhelmed by all the paperwork? Oh, it's not so bad once you know the system. Banks, insurance companies, credit agencies, they all have their little tricks and shortcuts. Most people don't realize how much flexibility there is in the process. Uncle Mike took a sip of wine. Like with your mom's situation. I was able to streamline everything, avoid months of probate delays. Aunt Linda beamed at her husband. Mike's always been so responsible with financial matters. Remember when his sister Patricia was in the hospital? He had everything organized before she even passed. The casual mention of my mother's name, the way they discussed her death like a successful business transaction, made my skin crawl. The recording device felt hot against my chest. I still feel bad about how little was left after everything, I said carefully. Mom always thought she had more saved up. Medical bills are brutal, Uncle Mike said, shaking his head. The hospital, the specialists, all those insurance gaps. Plus Patricia had some old credit card debt I had to settle. She was embarrassed about it, never mentioned it to you. I didn't want to burden you with those details while you were grieving. The lie rolled off his tongue so smoothly. Credit card debt. He was already setting up his excuse for the fraudulent accounts, rewriting history to make himself the hero cleaning up mom's fictional messes. You're such a good brother, Aunt Linda said, squeezing his hand. Always putting family first. Speaking of family, Uncle Mike said, I booked that cruise I mentioned. Linda and I leave next Friday for 2 weeks in the Caribbean. Early retirement celebration. He grinned. Life's too short not to enjoy the fruits of your labor. The fruits of your labor. He was going to sail around the Caribbean on my mother's life insurance money, probably charging the whole trip to credit cards opened in dead people's names. That sounds incredible, I said. You deserve it after all the stress of helping everyone. Exactly. And helping the Hendersons closed out my volunteer commitments for a while. Susan's estate was particularly complex, multiple accounts, investment portfolios, 2 life insurance policies. But we got it all sorted out. Uncle Mike's chest puffed with pride. She was so grateful. Said she didn't know what she would have done without me. 2 life insurance policies. Multiple accounts. I felt sick thinking about how much money Uncle Mike had probably stolen from Susan Henderson while she mourned her husband. After dinner, as Aunt Linda served coffee and homemade apple pie, Uncle Mike pulled out his phone to show me pictures of their cruise ship. Ocean view balcony suite, he said. Top deck. Linda's always wanted to see the Virgin Islands. The Virgin Islands, paid for with blood money. I smiled and nodded, making appropriate sounds of admiration while the FBI device captured every word of his casual confession to funding a luxury vacation with stolen inheritance money. When I finally left their house 3 hours later, I felt like I needed a shower. Uncle Mike had hugged me goodbye, told me he loved me, promised to bring me back something nice from his trip. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before driving away, just trying to process the evening. 15 to 20 families. The Hendersons with their multiple policies and investment portfolios. Uncle Mike's complete comfort discussing his streamlined estate management process. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Chen, *, excellent work. We got everything we needed. Henderson family confirmed as victims, $67,000 stolen. Morrison's cruise leaves Friday. We arrest him Thursday, *. 4 days. In 4 days, Uncle Mike's world was going to implode. I started my car and drove home, already planning exactly which family members I was going to call first when the news broke. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October air that used to make me think of new beginnings. Now it just felt like the calm before the storm. Agent Chen had texted me at 6 a.m., *, arrest scheduled for 11 a.m. at Morrison's workplace. Stay available, *. I called in sick to work and spent the morning pacing my apartment, checking my phone every few minutes. At 10:45, I couldn't stand the waiting anymore. I drove to Uncle Mike's office building and parked across the street, just close enough to watch. At exactly 11:03, 2 unmarked cars pulled into the parking lot. Agent Chen emerged from one, along with Detective Rivera and 2 other agents I didn't recognize. They walked into the building with the kind of purposeful stride that meant business. My phone rang 18 minutes later. It's done, Agent Chen said. Michael Morrison is in custody. He's being charged with mail fraud, identity theft, wire fraud, and elder abuse. Federal charges. He's looking at 15 to 20 years minimum. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt hollow. Did he say anything? He denied everything at first. Then when we showed him the evidence, the credit card statements, the bank records, the recording from Sunday night, he asked for a lawyer. Agent Chen paused. But here's the thing. His computer at work was full of files on grieving families. Names, addresses, financial information, even notes about which ones seemed most vulnerable and least likely to ask questions. My stomach turned. Uncle Mike had been running a systematic operation, treating bereaved families like a hunting ground. How many victims total? 23 families over 3 years. Total theft approaching $400,000. The number hit like a physical blow. Your mother wasn't his first victim, she wasn't even close. But she might have been his biggest single score. $400,000. 23 families destroyed during their darkest moments. I thought about all those funerals where Uncle Mike had approached grieving children with his helpful smile and concerned handshake. What happens now? Now the real work begins. We'll need you to testify, obviously. But first, we have to contact all the victim families. Some of them still don't know they were robbed. After hanging up, I sat in my car watching Uncle Mike's office building. His co-workers had no idea that the helpful guy from accounting had just been arrested for stealing nearly $500,000 from dead people. My phone started buzzing with calls. First Sarah, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. They arrested Dad at work. Mom's hysterical. The neighbors are all staring. What do we do? Then David Patterson, I just saw the news. Channel 7 is calling him the grief vulture. Jesus Christ. Then Anna Kowalski, my sister, just called. It's all over social media. Someone posted a picture of your uncle being walked out in handcuffs. The story was spreading faster than I'd expected. Local news had picked it up, and in our small community, nothing stayed secret for long. I could already see the Facebook comments forming, *, I can't believe Mike would do this. He seemed so trustworthy. Those poor families, *. But it was the text from my cousin Sarah that really got to me, *, Dad wants to see you. He's been granted one phone call before they transfer him to county jail. He specifically asked for your number, *. I stared at the message for a long time. Uncle Mike wanted to talk to me. The man who'd stolen my mother's identity, who'd robbed her grave, who'd looked me in the eye for months while spending her money, he wanted to have a conversation. Against every rational instinct, I found myself typing back, give them my number. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Suffolk County Detention Center. You have a collect call from an inmate. Will you accept the charges? My finger hovered over the screen. This was my chance to hang up, to let Uncle Mike sit in his cell and think about what he'd done. But I needed to hear what he had to say. I needed to understand how someone could do this to their own family. Yes, I said. I'll accept. There was a click, then Uncle Mike's voice, smaller than I'd ever heard it. Thank you for taking my call. Why? The word came out harder than I'd intended. Just tell me why, Uncle Mike. The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. It started small. It started small, Uncle Mike repeated, his voice hollow through the phone. Mrs. Patterson, David's mother. She was so sick at the end, kept forgetting things. Asked me to help with a grocery run using her debit card, but she gave me the wrong PIN 3 times. So I used her card for my own groceries too. Just once. $40. I gripped the phone tighter. $40 turned into $400,000. You don't understand the pressure I was under. Linda's medical bills from her surgery, the second mortgage we took out when I got passed over for promotion again. We were drowning. His voice cracked. When Mrs. Patterson died and I saw how easy it was to access her accounts, I told myself it was just temporary. Just until we got back on our feet. The justification made me sick. So you decided to rob dead people. It wasn't robbery. The old defensive Uncle Mike flared up briefly. These families had no idea how to handle estates properly. Half of them would have lost money to probate fees and bureaucratic nonsense anyway. I was just redistributing it more efficiently. You stole my mother's life insurance policy. $47,000 that was supposed to help me finish college. Patricia would have wanted me to take care of the family. She always said, don't. The word came out like a gunshot. Don't you dare tell me what my mother would have wanted. You opened credit cards in her name 3 months after she died. You bought your wife jewelry with money Mom saved working double shifts at the hospital. Uncle Mike was quiet for so long I heard the background noise of the detention center, metal doors clanging, muffled conversations, the echo of institutional misery. I kept telling myself I'd pay it back, he finally whispered. When the promotion came through, when Linda got better, when we sold the house. There was always going to be a way to make it right. What about the other families? The Hendersons, the Kowalskis, the 20 other families you destroyed? I never meant for it to get so big. But once you're in the system, once you know how it works. His voice took on an eerie detachment. Do you have any idea how much money just sits there when people die? Thousands of dollars in accounts that families don't even know exist. Insurance policies that never get claimed. It's all just wasted. The clinical way he described it chilled me. Uncle Mike had convinced himself he was performing a public service, harvesting money from the dead like some kind of financial vulture. The FBI agent said you had files on all of us. Notes about which families were most vulnerable. I was trying to help people who really needed it, he said, but the words sounded hollow even to him. Single mothers, elderly widows, families already struggling with medical debt. I prioritized cases where the money would make the biggest difference. The twisted logic was breathtaking. He'd turned grief counseling into market research, scanning obituaries and funeral homes like hunting grounds. Uncle Mike, they found 23 victim families. You've been stealing from dead people for 3 years. I know. His voice broke completely. God help me, I know what I've become. The line went quiet except for his ragged breathing. When he spoke again, it was barely audible. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry about Patricia, about you, about all of it. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did hurt me. You hurt all of us. I know, he whispered. And now I'm going to lose everything. The phone clicked dead, leaving me staring at my reflection in my car's side mirror. Uncle Mike was right about one thing, he was going to lose everything. His job, his house, his freedom, his family's respect. But what he'd never understand was that he'd already lost the most important thing years ago, his humanity. The news coverage exploded over the next 48 hours. Channel 7 ran the story as their lead segment, local man arrested for stealing $400,000 from grieving families. The reporter, a sharp-eyed woman named Jessica Martinez, had somehow gotten hold of Uncle Mike's mugshot and was using it as a backdrop while she interviewed Detective Rivera outside the courthouse. I was watching from my couch, eating cereal for dinner and trying to process the surreal experience of seeing my family's tragedy become evening news entertainment, when my phone rang. Unknown number with a Boston area code. Hello. Is this Patricia Morrison's son? This is Rebecca Santos from Channel 7 News. We're doing a follow-up story on the Michael Morrison case and we'd love to get your perspective as one of the primary victims. I hung up immediately, but the calls kept coming. 3 more reporters, a true crime podcaster, and someone claiming to be from a documentary production company. I turned off my phone and tried to disappear into my apartment, but the story had taken on a life of its own. By Friday morning, Uncle Mike's arrest photo was trending on the local Facebook community pages. The comments were vicious. Hope he rots in prison. How could anyone steal from the dead? My heart breaks for those poor families. But mixed in were more troubling responses. I can't believe Mike would do this. There must be some mistake. He helped my neighbor with her husband's estate last year. Was nothing but professional. Something doesn't add up here. That's when I realized Uncle Mike still had defenders. People who'd worked with him, families he'd helped legitimately, church members who knew him as the reliable volunteer who brought coffee and stayed late to fold bulletins. To them, the Mike Morrison being arrested was a different person than the one they knew. Sarah called me that afternoon, her voice barely controlled. There are reporters camped outside Mom and Dad's house. Mrs. Chin next door says they've been there since 6 a.m. Mom won't stop crying, and I keep getting calls from people asking if the charges are really true. What are you telling them? The truth. That Dad stole from 23 families and destroyed their trust when they needed help most. Her voice hardened. But some people don't want to hear it. Deacon Williams from Dad's church actually asked me if maybe you were lying because you were angry about your inheritance. My stomach dropped. He thinks I made this up. There's a whole group of them circling the wagons. Dad's co-workers started a legal defense fund. They raised $3,000 in 2 days. Sarah's laugh was bitter. $3,000. Do you know what Dad spent $3,000 on? A weekend trip to Atlantic City in March. I found the receipts in his desk. The defense fund hit me like a physical blow. While victim families were still discovering how much had been stolen from them, Uncle Mike's supporters were crowdfunding his legal fees. The same community that had trusted him to help their neighbors was now paying to help him avoid consequences. Sarah, there's something else. I've been getting calls from a reporter. She's digging deeper into the story. Jessica Martinez from Channel 7. She called me too. Asked about Dad's volunteer work, wanted to know if I thought there might be more victims. Sarah paused. She also asked about something weird. Apparently Dad's been receiving payments from something called Eternal Rest Estate Services for the past 18 months. Small amounts, $300 or $400 a month. You ever heard of that? I felt a chill run down my spine. No. What kind of payments? She wouldn't say, but she's investigating it. Said it might be connected to a larger operation. A larger operation. The words echoed in my head as I hung up. Uncle Mike's individual thefts were horrific enough, but what if they were part of something bigger? What if he wasn't working alone? That evening, Jessica Martinez called again. This time, I answered. Mr. Morrison, I know you've been avoiding media attention, but I think you need to hear what I've discovered about your uncle's activities. What do you mean? Eternal Rest Estate Services isn't just paying your uncle. We've identified at least 6 other people in Massachusetts and Rhode Island receiving similar payments. All of them have been arrested for estate fraud in the past 2 years. Her voice was grave. I think your uncle was part of a network. The meeting with Jessica Martinez took place at a coffee shop downtown, away from the reporters still camping outside Uncle Mike's house. She arrived with a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse and a kind of intense energy that told me she'd been living on caffeine and determination for days. What I'm about to show you is going to be hard to process, she said, sliding a photograph across the table. This is Dr. Marcus Webb, arrested in Providence last month for stealing $200,000 from 8 families. Look at his volunteer history. I studied the mugshot, a distinguished-looking man in his 50s with kind eyes that reminded me uncomfortably of Uncle Mike. According to the attached sheet, Webb had volunteered with hospice programs and hospital grief counseling services for 4 years. Same pattern as your uncle, Jessica continued. Targeting vulnerable families, offering to help with paperwork, systematically draining accounts. She pulled out another photo. This is Catherine Hayes, arrested in Springfield 3 weeks ago. $150,000 from 12 families. Also a grief counseling volunteer. My coffee grew cold as she laid out photo after photo. 6 people across 3 states, all arrested for estate fraud, all with histories of volunteering with bereaved families. The amounts ranged from Hayes' $150,000 to nearly $300,000 stolen by a funeral director in Hartford. Here's where it gets interesting, Jessica said, pulling out a bank statement. Eternal Rest Estate Services. It's registered as a grief counseling and estate management consultancy, based out of a P.O. box in Providence. But look at the payment records. She pointed to a series of deposits. Your uncle received $400 every month for 18 months. Always on the 15th, always the same amount. Webb got $350 monthly. Hayes got $425. Every single person we've identified was getting regular payments from this company. What kind of company pays people to steal from families? That's what I'm trying to figure out. The registration papers list the owner as JR Consulting LLC, but that's another shell company. And another. I've traced it through 4 different business entities, and they all lead back to the same address in Providence. Jessica pulled out her phone and showed me a street view photo. 1247, Industrial Boulevard. It's a mail forwarding service in a strip mall between a dry cleaner and a discount mattress store. So someone was coordinating this. Teaching people like Uncle Mike how to steal from grieving families. More than that. I think they were taking a cut. She flipped to another page showing wire transfer records. Every time your uncle received a payment from Eternal Rest, he made a wire transfer within 48 hours. Always to different accounts, always larger amounts. In March, he got $400 from them and wired out $2,800. The math was horrible but clear. Uncle Mike wasn't just stealing randomly, he was paying someone a percentage of his thefts. Like a franchise fee for running a grief-based theft operation. Jessica, how many families are we talking about total? Conservative estimate. Based on the 6 people we've identified and their average victim counts, probably over 150 families across 3 states. She closed the folder. But here's the thing, I think your uncle's arrest might have spooked the ringleaders. 3 of the other people on this list were arrested within 2 weeks of your uncle. That's not coincidence. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Chen, *, need to meet. New developments in your uncle's case. Are you available this afternoon, *? I showed the message to Jessica. She smiled grimly. I sent Agent Chen everything I found this morning. I think the FBI is about to make this case a lot bigger. As we left the coffee shop, Jessica handed me her card. One more thing. Your uncle's cruise. The one he was supposed to leave for today. It wasn't just a vacation. 3 other people from the Eternal Rest Payments list booked the same cruise, same dates. I think it was supposed to be some kind of meeting. A meeting that would never happen, because Uncle Mike was sitting in federal detention while his co-conspirators scattered like roaches when the lights came on. The FBI field office felt different this time. Agent Chen had moved us to a larger conference room, and Detective Rivera was there along with 3 other agents I hadn't met. The whiteboard behind them was covered in photos, flowcharts, and what looked like a family tree of criminal connections. We've been busy since your uncle's arrest, Agent Chen said, pulling out a chair. Jessica Martinez's investigation opened doors we didn't even know existed. Michael Morrison wasn't just stealing from families, he was part of a coordinated criminal enterprise. She clicked a remote, and a projection screen descended from the ceiling. The first slide showed a map of New England dotted with red pins. Eternal Rest Estate Services has been operating for 3 years across 6 states. We've identified 14 active participants and at least 200 victim families. Your uncle was actually one of their smaller operators. The number hit like a physical blow. 200 families. 200 people who trusted someone during the worst moments of their lives, only to be systematically robbed. The ringleader is a man named Jonathan Reese, Agent Chin continued. Former insurance adjuster who got fired for falsifying claims in 2019. He developed this network by recruiting volunteers from hospitals, churches, and funeral homes, people who already had access to grieving families. The next slide showed a professional headshot of a thin man in his 40s with wire-rimmed glasses and a forgettable face. He looked like a high school guidance counselor, not someone who'd masterminded a multi-state theft ring. Reese would identify potential recruits, people with financial problems, gambling debts, family medical expenses. He'd approach them at volunteer training sessions or church events, start conversations about how much money gets wasted in estate processing. Agent Chen's voice took on a disgusted edge. He called it grief arbitrage. Detective Rivera leaned forward. Your uncle's financial records show he started receiving training materials in January 2022. Email attachments with titles like Navigating Probate Efficiently and Common Estate Planning Mistakes. But when our tech team analyzed them, they were actually instruction manuals for identity theft. How to forge signatures, which credit card companies had the easiest approval processes, how to time account closures to avoid detection, Agent Chen added. Reese had turned estate fraud into a teachable system. I thought about Uncle Mike's casual confidence that Sunday night, the way he bragged about knowing tricks and shortcuts in the financial system. He hadn't developed that expertise through trial and error, he'd been trained. The cruise ship meeting wasn't for vacation, Agent Chen said, clicking to the next slide. It was their annual conference. Reese booked the same Caribbean cruise every October, invited his top performers for what he called professional development workshops. They'd spend a week sharing techniques, identifying new target demographics, planning expansion into new states. The screen showed the cruise ship's itinerary, 7 days of island hopping that doubled as a floating seminar for professional grave robbers. Uncle Mike had been excited about the ocean view balcony suite, not knowing he was headed to theft training camp. We arrested Reese yesterday morning at his home in Providence, Detective Rivera said. Found computer servers with detailed files on over 300 families across New England. Names, addresses, financial information, even psychological profiles noting which families seemed most compliant or least likely to ask questions. My stomach churned. Somewhere in those files was probably a detailed analysis of my grief, my trust, my vulnerability after Mom died. Clinical notes about how to exploit my emotional state for maximum financial gain. What happens to the other families? The 200 victims. That's where it gets complicated, Agent Chin said. Some of the stolen money is recoverable, insurance payouts that were never distributed, bank accounts that were closed but not emptied. But a lot of it was spent years ago. Vacation homes, luxury cars, gambling debts. These people were living high on stolen inheritance money. She handed me a thick folder. We need you to review these victim impact statements. Families who want their stories included when we prosecute Reese and his network. Your testimony about your uncle's methods could help convict the person who taught him how to steal from your mother's memory. I opened the folder and immediately recognized the pain in the first letter, *, my husband died of cancer in March 2022. Catherine Hayes offered to help with his estate paperwork. By the time I discovered the theft 8 months later, she had stolen $23,000 from our children's college fund, *. 200 families. 200 versions of my story, all orchestrated by a man who turned human grief into a profitable business model. Agent Chen's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and frowned. We might have another problem. Jessica Martinez just texted, 3 more Eternal Rest participants were arrested this morning, but 2 others have disappeared completely. Their houses are cleared out, bank accounts emptied. The network was collapsing, but some of the thieves were escaping with their stolen money intact. The courtroom was packed for Uncle Mike's sentencing hearing. I sat in the front row with David Patterson and Anna Kowalski, watching my uncle shuffle to the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit that made him look smaller and older than I remembered. The man who commanded respect at family dinners and church potlucks now looked like exactly what he was, a common criminal. Judge Harrison had already sentenced 3 other Eternal Rest participants that week. Catherine Hayes got 12 years. Dr. Marcus Webb got 15. The pattern was clear, these weren't isolated incidents of desperation, but calculated participation in an organized criminal enterprise. Your Honor, Uncle Mike's lawyer began, my client was manipulated by Jonathan Reese, exploited during a period of financial vulnerability. Mr. Morrison deeply regrets his actions and has cooperated fully with federal investigators. The cooperation part was news to me. Agent Chen had mentioned that Uncle Mike was providing information about other network members, but hearing it in court felt like another betrayal. Even now, he was making deals, trying to minimize his consequences. Judge Harrison wasn't impressed. Mr. Morrison, you stand convicted of defrauding 23 families during their periods of deepest grief. The court has reviewed victim impact statements describing the emotional and financial devastation your actions caused. Do you have anything to say before sentencing? Uncle Mike stood slowly, his shackled hands clutching a piece of paper. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. Your Honor, I want to apologize to my nephew and all the families I hurt. I told myself I was helping people, but I know now that was just an excuse for my greed. I've destroyed my family's trust and dishonored my sister's memory. He turned toward the gallery, his eyes finding mine. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want everyone to know that the shame I feel will last longer than any prison sentence. The words sounded rehearsed, coached by his lawyer to generate sympathy. But behind them, I heard something else, genuine horror at what he'd become. Uncle Mike finally understood the magnitude of his crimes, and it was eating him alive. 18 years federal prison, Judge Harrison announced. No possibility of parole for the first 12 years. Additionally, the court orders full restitution to victim families, though the defendant's assets are insufficient to cover the total amount stolen. 18 years. Uncle Mike would be 72 when he got out, assuming he lived that long. The sentence felt both satisfying and hollow, justice served, but nothing would bring back the money or the trust he destroyed. As the bailiff led Uncle Mike away, he looked back one final time. Our eyes met across the courtroom, and I saw something I'd never seen before, complete defeat. The confident, helpful family patriarch was gone, replaced by a broken man who'd finally grasped the true cost of his choices. Outside the courthouse, Jessica Martinez was waiting with her camera crew. How do you feel about the sentence? She asked, shoving a microphone toward my face. 18 years won't bring back my mother's life insurance money, I said. But maybe it'll make other people think twice before they exploit grieving families. As we walked to our cars, Anna Kowalski grabbed my arm. It's not over, she said quietly. Agent Chin called me this morning. They found 2 more eternal rest operators in Vermont, and they think there might be a copycat network starting up in New York. Same methods, different leadership. The revelation hit like ice water. Even with Reese and his top lieutenants in prison, the system they'd created was spreading. Other criminals were studying their techniques, adapting their methods, building new networks to harvest money from the dead. Uncle Mike was going to prison, but his legacy of exploiting grief would continue. 6 months after Uncle Mike's sentencing, I thought the nightmare was finally over. The FBI had wrapped up the eternal rest investigation, the media attention had died down, and I was slowly rebuilding my life with the partial restitution money I'd received. Then Detective Rivera called with news that made my blood run cold. We need to meet, she said, her voice tense. There's been a development in your uncle's case. How soon can you get to the station? I found her in the same conference room where this had all started, but now she looked exhausted, like someone who'd been working 18-hour days. Spread across the table were photographs, financial records, and what looked like prison correspondence. Your uncle's been busy in federal prison, she said without preamble. He's been writing letters. Lots of them. She slid a manila envelope across the table. These are copies of correspondence the prison intercepted. Your uncle has been contacting families of recently deceased people, offering his expertise in estate management. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. The first letter was addressed to someone named Margaret Foster in Portland, Maine. Asterisk, Dear Mrs. Foster, I read about your husband's passing in the obituary section. Having recently helped families navigate similar losses, I wanted to offer my condolences and my assistance with any complex estate matters. Asterisk. He's recruiting from prison. I whispered. Not just recruiting. Teaching. Detective Rivera pulled out another document. We intercepted a 12-page instruction manual he was trying to mail to someone in Vermont. Complete step-by-step guide to identity theft, credit card fraud, insurance manipulation. Everything he learned from the Eternal Rest Network. I flipped through the pages, feeling sick. Uncle Mike had turned his criminal expertise into a correspondence course, complete with helpful tips. Asterisk, always wait at least 60 days after death before applying for credit. This avoids automated death record checks. Target families with children under 25, they're less likely to understand estate procedures. Asterisk. How many people has he contacted? 47 families across New England. All recent deaths, all people who looked financially comfortable based on their obituaries. Rivera rubbed her temples. But here's the really disturbing part, 3 of those families have reported suspicious activity on their deceased relatives' credit reports. The room felt like it was spinning. Someone's actually following his instructions. Multiple people. We've identified at least 5 individuals who've been corresponding with your uncle and subsequently attempting identity theft. One of them successfully opened 2 credit cards using a dead man's information, racked up $8,000 in charges before we caught him. She handed me another letter, this one written in Uncle Mike's familiar handwriting. Asterisk, the key is building trust with the family first. Attend the funeral, offer condolences, volunteer to help with paperwork. Grief makes people vulnerable, use that vulnerability wisely. Asterisk. He's franchising his operation, I said, the full horror sinking in. Teaching other people to become grief predators. The worst part is we can't stop him from writing letters. Prison correspondence is protected unless we can prove direct criminal conspiracy, which is hard to establish when he's just sharing his experiences with fellow volunteers in estate management. I thought about all those families receiving Uncle Mike's helpful letters during their darkest moments. Parents who'd lost children, spouses mourning partners, adult children trying to handle their parents' final affairs. All of them potential targets for the criminals my uncle was training through the mail. What about the people following his instructions? Can you arrest them? We're working on it, but proving intent is complicated when they're still in the early stages of identity theft. By the time we build solid cases, they might have stolen thousands from multiple families. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Asterisk, Mom got a weird letter today. Someone claiming Dad referred them as an estate consultant. Should I be worried? Asterisk. I showed Rivera the message. Her face went pale. He's not just recruiting strangers. He's using his family connections to build credibility. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 year after Uncle Mike's sentencing. My name was written in his familiar handwriting across the front of a standard prison envelope. I almost threw it away unopened, but something made me hesitate. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper with a message that made my blood freeze. Asterisk, I know you think you've won, but my work continues. Every family I've contacted, every person I've taught, they're my legacy now. Patricia's death started something bigger than you can imagine. You can't stop all of them. Asterisk. I drove straight to Detective Rivera's office, the letter trembling in my hands. She read it twice, her expression growing darker each time. This changes everything, she said, reaching for her phone. This isn't just correspondence anymore, it's a direct threat to continue criminal activity. We can use this to get him moved to administrative segregation, cut off his mail privileges completely. But I had a different idea. What if we don't stop him? What if we let him keep writing, but monitor everything? Rivera looked at me like I'd lost my mind. You want him to keep recruiting criminals? I want him to lead us to all of them. The plan was crystallizing in my head. Set up a sting operation. Let him think he's building his network while you track every person he contacts, every piece of advice he gives. Catch them all at once instead of playing whack-a-mole. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in the federal prison's visiting room, staring across a metal table at Uncle Mike. He looked smaller in his prison uniform, but his eyes still held that calculating gleam that had helped him steal from 23 families. I was surprised you wanted to visit, he said, his voice cautious. I wanted to tell you that you were right, I replied, the lie tasting bitter in my mouth. The FBI wire taped to my chest felt like it was burning through my shirt. About the system being broken, about all that money just sitting there when people die. Uncle Mike leaned forward, interested despite himself. What do you mean? I've been helping some families with estate issues. Using some of the techniques you mentioned in your letters. I watched his face carefully. Mrs. Chen from my building lost her husband last month. Left behind quite a bit of money in old accounts. You have to be careful, Uncle Mike said, his voice dropping to a whisper. The trick is building relationships first. Make them trust you completely before you start accessing anything financial. For the next 45 minutes, I let Uncle Mike coach me through a fictional theft operation while the FBI recorded every word. He described techniques for forging signatures, timing account closures, even specific credit card companies that had weak verification processes. The most important thing, he said as our time wound down, is documentation. Keep detailed records of every family's financial situation. That's what separates professionals from amateurs. I left the prison feeling sick but victorious. Uncle Mike had just provided enough evidence to upgrade his charges and add years to his sentence. Over the next 6 months, the FBI used Uncle Mike's correspondence network to identify and arrest 43 people across 12 states. They caught them in the act of attempting identity theft, armed with step-by-step instructions written in my uncle's handwriting. The final arrest came on a cold December morning when federal agents raided the home of Thomas Brennan in Buffalo, New York. They found him in the middle of filling out a credit card application using the identity of a man who died 3 weeks earlier. In his desk drawer were 17 letters from Uncle Mike, along with detailed files on 32 deceased individuals. Uncle Mike's sentence was extended to 25 years. At his resentencing hearing, I stood up during victim impact statements and looked him directly in the eye. You thought you were building a legacy, I said, my voice carrying across the silent courtroom. You thought you'd found a way to keep profiting from grief even from behind bars. But all you did was help us catch every single person sick enough to follow in your footsteps. Justice had finally been served, not just for my mother, but for every family whose trust had been weaponized against them.